What's striking to me about Koizumi's images, though, is that it adds another layer by saying it's not just that there's war outside of Japan and there's civilian life that's going on. There's actually the way in which civilian life merges with the war. Not in a sense that everyone is necessarily being taken up with in a militaristic fervor or the government is always clamping down. But if you see some of these images, it's striking to me how soldiers are part of the everyday scenery in a not in an over the top way, in a way that makes sense in a country that is under full national conscription system, where you have increasing numbers of soldiers, and they're just part of their everyday life. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that the war is accelerating or the wartime regime's oppression is getting necessarily harsh so quickly, but it does show a society where it's normal to have soldiers walking in a major shrine or park in a way that I think makes us challenge sort of that either or image of 1930s Japan, either as completely being overwhelmed by a militaristic fervor in the dark valley, or one where one in which there's only consumption and modernism and Hollywood.
It's really interesting. I was musing if Koizumi were alive today and strolling around America, and he did a print of the crowd at the World Series, you would see a section where there were a lot of camouflage uniforms, soldiers. Not much different than we're seeing in these Koizumi prints. The military present in civilian life and integrated into its activities is something we're experiencing now, and it's probably very similar to what was going on in Japan. Life goes on, but yet there is this inflection point visually where you see a military presence like you hadn't seen it before.
Well, I think it's very interesting to look at it as Americans today, because the military presence, if you take every NFL game, is preceded by a military presence and military activities. They're all part of our culture and our life today. Doesn't mean they're our whole culture and our whole life.
Right.
We Americans are told these are our heroes, they are defending the country. This is what Japanese were told.
Mm-hmm.
And really gets severe in Japan and really becomes a militaristic state after 1937, when you start indoctrinating people, what is called among historians socialization for death, giving up your life for your country is the noblest thing. But he's catching this larger society, and it really says, you say to yourself, what did militarization really mean in the general culture to a social, cultural historian, particularly from the 20s through the early, mid-30s? I think it makes us see things differently. He's living through it.